Welcome to episode 6 of Mindful Transitions. Ian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks, Walter. How about yourself?
Be honest, with you, I've been perplexed. I've been perplexed. I've been a little bit saddened by current events. I've been excited. I think I've probably experienced all my emotions in this past week. I think today's talk is going to be my way of actually getting some of my thoughts and feelings out as well. But as far as yourself, how have you been? I know that you've been feeling good, but how are you been? What are your thoughts about what's been going on?
Um, it's been an interesting time for me because, like, the first off thing is like I don't understand it. I can't really relate to it. What's been happening? Um, so it's sort of like there's this misstep for me in what's going on because I don't really understand it. I'm not. I guess I'm like I say I'm not a part of it, and at the same time I know I'm a part of it. So uh, it's sort of been this sort of like, what does it look like? What's going on? And really, at the end of the day, there's a big piece of it is there's sort of like a fear of like, what if I say the wrong thing, or what if I do something that makes people more upset or gets like taken the wrong way.
Correct. Well, uh, and I feel the other way is because growing up a Hispanic Canadian, I did experience prejudice, and I've experienced some bigotry, and I've experienced those things. But I think the thing about it for myself is that because of the type of coaching that I do, where my intention is to raise the level of consciousness of the world one person at a time, which is really our IPEC sort of mantra as well, too, is I really am endeavoring to not fall into a victim stage or also get into that being angry stage. Although I'm allowing myself to experience those emotions, I'm not allowing myself to get stuck in there because the whole idea is we're human and we're supposed to have emotions. We're just not supposed to stay there, right? And so, um, the one thing that I do know is that the world at times can seem, when you're experiencing racism or prejudice, can seem like um, a very hard place to be. And there's other times where you experience kindness and goodness and people being compassionate, where the world just seems to be just an amazing place. So I think for myself, I really wanted to. I did take a look at what was going on the weekend. I was disheartened by the violence towards people versus people and the damage that's being done. But I think that one of the things that's really important is because we're endeavoring to talk about mindful transitions, and we understand that the only constant in life is change. Even now, one of the things that I posted on one of my recent posts on Facebook was that we don't need a revolution, we need evolution. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, we don't need the violence. We need a shift in our perspective. We need a shift in how we deal with things. That's going to actually make a change going forward that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Because I think it's really easy to really allow the filters in which we see life to drop us on one side or the other of the fence, and then see um, other people of color or people that are not of color as enemies, right? So we can really have this polarization. And I think that when we talk about evolution, what I'm really thinking about is really um, having a race of consciousness that see each other as just the oppressor or the oppressed, or the black person, the white person, the Hispanic person, the Chinese person, more of that, but really to see each other as again, humans who all have the same aspirations for their lives. We all want to have that sense of love and belonging. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. And and the thing is that one of the things that you, when we were talking, you said something by a quote by Einstein, that we can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created the problem to begin with. So I think that based on what you said, I think that it's really important to understand that as we're going through a transition, it's that old thing. If we keep thinking what we've always thought, right, we'll start creating those feelings that we've always had. The actions will be the same actions we've always done, and we'll get what we've always gotten, which is the reason why solutions haven't happened. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and it sounds like something we've talked about a little before, but it's about those like limiting beliefs. So it's about things that have always happened that have become our beliefs that whether we know or not, we could be taking actions on or moving things forward just based on that sort of like belief system that's in place. So if we think about bringing awareness to that, and sort of shifting that level of consciousness and sort of seeing it from a different perspective, um, could be a way to find a solution.
The one thing that I've heard is this. I forget whether it was Barack Obama, or I don't know if he said it, but somebody said that racism is our DNA. And I don't necessarily agree with racism in our DNA. I believe that that's actually a learned behavior.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that? Is racism in our DNA, or is that a learned behavior?
I
What
would
is
say
it?
it's a learned behavior. I don't think it's in our DNA. Science may say otherwise, but I don't think so. um, I I would say it's a learned behavior.
And here's the interesting part: is that I think from ourselves as coaches too, is when you think about some of the things that we've discussed about, and how can you make a more mindful transition? Well, the world as we know it is going through a transition right now on a global scale, but also the transitions are also happening at a personal scale. There's a lot of people that no longer have jobs to go to. People that are discovering things about their relationships that they may not be able to live with anymore. Even sports, the world as we know it is going through a major transition. So I think that what's really important for people to understand is that we're awareness of ourselves, our feelings, the stories we're telling ourselves, being aware of how other people are being impacted by the things that we say and do is more important than ever as we're going through this transition. I appreciate your honesty about not feeling as connected to everything that's going on as you might if you were a person of color or what have you, or had experienced some of that. And I think that that's really important because I think that being aware, even that that you're not feeling that, also gives you the ability to have some empathy for other people that maybe have had a different experience, and it opens you up. And I think that one of the attributes of growing in your level of awareness and consciousness is that curiosity, right? So what are some of the things that you're curious about?
Um, if I get like really like honest with it right now, um, is like what is it like to have that experience? Is sort of like a question that comes to mind. Like, how does that make you feel? And really, like, sort of the one that, uh, like, sort of like is pointed but curious at the same time is like what does that do to you? Like how does that or how has that impacted the choices you've made in your life? Because like I have no idea and I can't relate to that at all.
Well, I think you brought a really good point, because when we go back to that whole the perspective that Joe Dispenza has, who's a neuroscientist, and he said that 95% of decisions we make in the moment are based on our subconscious. 5% are based on our conscious thinking. So, and when we understand our subconscious stores a lot of our memories in forms of feelings, and they have a tendency to show up when you have a feeling, and then you combine it with a story or thoughts. You create the emotions, which drive the behavior. Right? Like right now, I think that what we're experiencing is that you have people that have for like 90 days have been, for all intents and purposes, we've all been under house arrest. Call it what you may, right? Uh, Most of the people that have been sheltering in place have been healthy. And then you combine that with um, an act that was so, um, I guess, for all intents and purposes, that was so obvious and evil that regardless of your culture, your color, what have you, everybody agrees that it was actually, regardless of whether this guy was a criminal or he wasn't, what have you, the fact that no human being deserves to die in that manner. But what happened is that a lot of people were, all their past pain came into the present moment. And because we don't get taught how to really be more aware, or what consciousness is, or that we're not our minds, it's a tool, right? A lot of people think that that's just who they are. And so we start having people that protest peacefully, and there's other people that create violence to express, and it's an inappropriate expression of this catabolic energy. They have to release this, what's going on for them, and then we have the rest of us sitting there and judging things left or right. They're good, they're bad. Oh well, if even these peaceful protesters, I thought we're supposed to shelter in place, and so we everybody gets into this sort of problem, and problems, right,
Yep.
are about the past or future. And I know that this has triggered something for you, so not triggered, but stirred up something in you. So what is it when we hear what I just said? What comes up for you?
It's sort of like a whirlwind of judgments and expectations are coming up. So like there's one side of it where like when the protests turn violent, people are like you can't do that. That's wrong. When people are protesting peacefully, people are like, well, you can't do that. That's wrong. And they're not saying that the protesting is wrong. What they're saying is like you're not social distancing. Now, if we weren't in the circumstances of a pandemic, would they be saying that? No, they probably wouldn't be. And it's sort of like, and that's what I mean by this whirlwind. It's just building up, and there's no real way to release it right now.
I think right now, like I said, I was feeling, because I do have a lot of empathy for people. The things that I've seen out there really I felt some of the pain and hurt. Every time I heard about people getting hurt, their businesses getting lost, as well. I felt some of the racism. I can understand. I can relate with them because I've experienced that growing up. But I think that what's really important is that we all have to decide, right, how we're going to get through this change. the world as we know is changing, and that whole thing about I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama, what have you, talked about be the change that you want to see in the world, right? So the question is that are the events of not only the past week but even the past um, 3 months, or for some people that have experienced racism, the events of the last 40 years or hundreds of years. Are these events going to make us bitter, or are they going to make us better? And I think that when we talk about awareness, it's noticing what's happening inside of ourselves and our feelings. Are we experiencing feelings from the past? Are we creating stories to justify how we're feeling? Are we acting in a way and then justifying and rationalizing why we're doing that? And then the question is that when we talked about acceptance, well, what do we have to accept about the situation, right? Um, Perhaps we have to accept the fact that bad things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, good things happen to bad people. There's so many stories out there that perhaps we have to accept that life is what it is, and that we may not necessarily have control over what can be done. We can have influence. We can people can vote. People can um, write blogs. They can go talk at different talks. Like focus on how to have influence, because things are not in our control, right? And even if you can't go out and talk to a lot of people, right? Have a talk with people that are close to you. Influence them, right? Influence them to become curious about what the other side's thinking about, right? And really, when you're looking to be an influencer, right? Asking questions, right? What do you think about this idea of focusing on how you could have influence as opposed to what you can control or can't control?
It sort of makes me think of it. It's changing how you're looking at the situation. So the first thing that comes to mind, sorry, excuse me. Um, it takes me from thinking of like, how is this affecting me? Like, so it's sort of shifting it from being about me to how I can contribute to others. Um, and that shift really lets me see a lot of different aspects and perspectives and um, things that can actually be done. So it sort of just touches on like it really takes away from the emotion that I'm feeling and gives me a way to express it in a way that's beneficial for myself and others.
So choosing to show up in a way that contributes to the common good,
Yeah.
and and that comes back to making choices, conscious choices in the moment. Because when we can use that 5% of our conscious mind to choose how we're going to show up today, because that's what we have control over, right? Then, because that can lead us to something, because we talked about how do you trust a process that you feel is flawed or that is unfair, unjust, right? You can't. It's really, you're going to have those energy drops into feeling overwhelmed at the effect of life, or you're going to get angry, looking for a way to release that anger, right? But perhaps trusting the process isn't about something outside of ourselves. What if trusting the process is our process? Our process of being willing to be curious about why we're feeling or thinking things, right? Asking ourselves, right? Is this serving the higher good? Asking ourselves, is this person from another culture, another color, truly our neighbor, right? Not our enemy, right? Asking those questions. And if we do see them as being our enemy, why? Like what makes them different? What We don't know how life happened other than the fact that it's a miracle, right? What would have happened if I was born a black person, a white person, a Chinese person, right? What right? Would that have made me any more of an enemy of other people? No. And then the process of accepting, what is it that I have to accept about the world? Well, the world is not perfect. And problems are about the past or the future, right? And when we continuously think about what the problems are, right? It's that Einstein thing again, is how can we solve a problem that's not of the moment, right? Why don't we focus on situations? What's happening right now, right? How can I love my neighbor as myself right now, right? Well, I could do it by not calling you names. I can do it by honoring your humanness, your person, by having these discussions, right?
Yeah, and it's just, and like sort of what you're saying is like what makes us different is also the same thing that makes us unique. So, like, what happens if we looked at these differences and sort of just asked a different question? Is like, what can I learn from this person? Right? Like, if we viewed them as better than ourselves, because something that I actually believe is that everyone is better than me at something, and I can always learn from them. It doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 55 years old or 65 or whatever. Like, it just doesn't matter. There's always something that I can learn from them. And that, to me, is part of what makes us unique. So, why don't, like, what if we took that uniqueness that makes us different and we sort of embraced it, accepted it, and started asking, what can we learn from it? Like, what difference would that make?
Think about this thought. If we were stranded on a highway thousands of miles from home, would we really care the color of the skin or the nationality of the person that came to rescue us, and that came to, and not even rescue us, it came to our aid, gave us a jump start, or came and, right? We really wouldn't, would we?
No. It probably wouldn't cross your mind.
No. But so I think that really, when you think about it, the process that we have to trust is the process of the self growth that we're all in the process of doing. As much as there's a lot of negative things happening in the world right now, there's also a great awakening. There's a lot of expansion of energy. Families are connecting more to each other, right? People are finding out that they have skills that they can do from home. We're finding that couples are getting time to talk to one another. We're finding that that neighbors are loving their neighbors and doing great things for themselves. And we're also finding people that are finally saying, hey, maybe it's time for me to get into this personal development thing. I'm not happy with the status quo. And I don't know about you, but the people I coach are all nationalities, genders. Like, I don't know what's your coaching practice like as far as the makeup?
Um, it's a mix. Um, so I have Canadians. Uh, I think they're one's from Slovakia, one's from Iran. Um, the one I think he's from Jamaica. Um, are probably like the most that I can think of right off the top of my head there, but it's
So,
it's all over the place.
so here's the thing. Perhaps, right? Perhaps this world is maybe more united than we think it is, right? Because right now we're being fed all the images that the world is all polarized, right? Maybe instead of focusing on the problems that we perceive, right? Maybe focus on the situation we're in. Maybe it's really how we get through this transition is to be more present with each other, right? And see our, and look for the things that we have in common, not the things that we don't have in common. Perhaps that is the mindful transition. Right? And the thing about it, I say perhaps because I know that there's going to be a lot of people that have a lot of various opinions on things, and I think that everybody, all of us, are entitled to our truth, but understanding that our truth is not their truth, right? It's based on the filters that we see. Um, so that any one thing that happens, people are going to see it from different perspectives. Remember that old number where you have the number six, and one person's on one end of the number six, the other one's on one saying it's a nine, the other one's a six. Yeah, we're going to have different opinions, but one thing we have in common is that we are all humans, and we all need to work together to be able to exist in harmony. And how we get there is the $4 trillion question. And our part of it is we're even doing this mindful transition channel is our way of contributing to people, right? We're two people that look different. We have different over 20 years of differences, but we have a kindred heart to do something with our lives of impact, influence, and that contributes to a common good. So we can't save the world, but what we could do is we can impact our circle of influence. And by doing our best to evolve as humans ourselves, as doing the work that we need to do and helping other people do the work, perhaps that's what's needed, right?
Yeah, and I sort of just like the analogy, and I sort of mentioned it before, but there's a gap between where we're at right now and where we want to be, and it's sort of like what's going to be the bridge that brings those two together. And I really sort of hold the space that by using mindfulness and mindful practices, um, can be a tool that begins to start building that bridge to get to where we want to end up.
I agree. And I think that as people can let go of some of their stories and become more present, um, perhaps people can connect a little bit more to their own um, spirituality, whatever it is, whether they're Christians, whether they're Buddhists, whatever it is, right? But connect to that love that is really everybody's deepest driving passion, right? People, there's things that people want. People want to have a sense of love and belonging, and they want to feel seen and heard, right? So perhaps using this time of transition to really connect to that part of themselves that is greater than ourselves, right? And I think that when we can start to look for the things that we have in common, that perhaps that is the beginning of a mindful transition where we are seeing ourselves less as a particular type of race or culture or even citizenship, but we are actually seeing ourselves in the bigger perspective that we are all, anything I do to you, I'm doing to myself. And the reason why we love our neighbor as ourselves is because when I contribute to you, I'm contributing to myself. And perhaps that's the direction that may help us to get through this difficult time. And all we could do is begin with ourselves. And I just really thank you, Ian, for having this talk. I know that when we talked about this, it was how can we do this in a way that's meaningful for people without making anybody right or wrong, or as ourselves even saying anything right or wrong. We're not here to hurt anybody or diminish anybody's perspective, but just to bring a little bit more, just a different perspective that could help people to manage this difficult emotional, uh, financial, physical time that we're going through.